Andrew Jackson President. The Age of Jackson. When Americans elected Andrew Jackson president in 1828, many wealthy citizens worried that the reign of King Mob had indeed come to Washington. In certain ways, Jackson was a strange figure to represent the common man. Although born poor, he became a wealthy slave owner in Tennessee. What made him popular with the masses was his success in conquering Indians and his dislike of rich Northerners, especially bankers. Jackson opened up the White House to give ordinary folks the chance to have a say in their government. Jackson used his popularity to increase the power of the presidency. He forced South Carolina and its powerful senators, John Calhoun, to back down when that state tried on its own to declare a federal revenue bill unconstitutional. Jackson continued his ruthless campaign against the Indians. He refused to accept the authority of Chief Justice John Marshall, who tried to use the Supreme Court to keep the Cherokees from being removed from their land. Jackson opposed a national bank, fearing that rich bankers would take away the liberties of the American people. The bank war helped through the economy into a depression, a severe downturn that forced many businesses to close and put thousands out of work. One of the most important events to occur during the Age of Jackson was the Second Great Awakening. The major difference between the Second Great Awakening and the religious revival of the 1700s was that the clergy now emphasized ways in which people might try to perfect themselves instead of dwelling on the sinful sides of human nature. Christian reformers: if people could become perfect, so could society. That is why the Second Great Awakening encouraged the first big wave of social reform in American history. Evangelical women especially put their time into trying to make life better for the mentally ill, prisoners, and the poor. Their ideas for making a perfect world were not always welcomed by others. Many reformers hoped to rid the world of alcohol, set a plea for temperance, as the effort was not popular among working men who were used to drinking a couple of glasses of beer to relax after a hard day. However, those men's wives were often happy to have that money available for household purchases. These Christian reformers were prominent figures in the new movement against slavery. They had to fight a formidable foe, for the empire of the slaveholder grew stronger during these decades. At the time of Revolution, many Americans, Thomas Jefferson among them, believed that slavery would die out naturally. When the federal government outlawed the slave trade in 1808, it looked as if Jefferson's prediction might come true. King Cotton. Everything changed when Eli Whitney's cotton gin, invented in 1793, came into use throughout the South. The gin separated the many little seeds in a cotton ball from the actual cotton fiber. Before Whitney's invention, this had taken a lot of time, making the process expensive. The new method was faster and highly profitable, and it freed up slave labor for planting, weeding, and harvesting. Rice and indigo, a plant that contains a blue dye, were other important crops worked by slaves. But cotton became king throughout much of the South, especially in states of the Deep South, such as Mississippi and Alabama. Certain slave owners shipped their raw cotton to northern factories for processing into thread, yarn, and fabric. In many ways, the economy of the whole country depended on slave labor. The combination of slavery and cotton placed the South in a unique position during these years. Two-thirds of all Southern whites owned no slaves. This majority of small-scale or yeomen farmers often did not approve of what the slave owners did, but the slave owners were so rich and politically powerful that they ruled the region. The South was just as Christian as the North, with evangelical revivals throughout the region. But many of the white ministers were slave owners. To protect their way of life, they preached that every person, especially every slave, should be content to accept his or her place in life. Slaves' lives were completely controlled by their masters. At any moment, a slave could be whipped or have an ear or a toe chopped off. For the slightest disobedience, even kind masters, if they were in need of money, sold brother away from sister or child away from parent. But slaves were determined to live as decent a life as possible under these circumstances. They rely on one another, cultivating strong extended family networks of aunts, uncles, and cousins. They created their own strong culture, and they continued to develop their Christian faith as a way to survive hardships. Masters expected Christianity to make slaves obedient. Slaves had a different idea of how to use their faith. Nat Turner is the most extreme example of a slave using the religion of his master as a force for rebellion rather than subservience. Nat Turner, slave rebel. In August 1831, Nat Turner led the most deadly slave revolt in all American history. Turner began by murdering his master, Joseph Chavez, and Chavez's family. After killing Chavez, Turner and his allies went from plantation to plantation in his home of Southampton County, Virginia. There is no official record of how many people died in the uprising. More than 50 whites were killed, and the state executed as many blacks, including Turner himself. What led to such murderous acts? Even Turner later stated that Travis was to me a kind master and placed great confidence in me. In fact, I had no cause to complain about his treatment. Nat Turner had been treated badly by other masters and knew firsthand the cruelties of slavery. When he was 22, his owner, Samuel Turner, died. Nat, his wife Cherry, and his mother were all sold to different plantations. Many slaves experienced simple fates. What made Nat Turner react as he did? Before his execution, Turner detected a confession in which he tried to explain his ideas. A long-time preacher, Turner thought himself ordained for some great purpose in the hands of the Almighty. He experienced a religious vision in which white spirits and black spirits engaged in battle. The spirits of the Lord told him that he should arise and slay my enemies with their own weapons. Statements such as these suggest that he was influenced by the religious favor of the time. The majority of slaves did not revolt because whites simply held too much power. Still, Nat Turner's rebellion terrified whites throughout the South. One Virginia state legislator spoke of the suspicion that a Nat Turner might be in every family, that the same bloody deed could be acted over at any time in any place, that the materials for it were spread through the land and always ready for a light explosion. Nat Turner left an important legacy for our own time. Since 1831, Nat Turner was served as an example of the American tradition of fiery rebellion against racial injustice. Justifying slavery. Faced with the threat of slave uprisings, Southern slaveholders recognized that they needed to offer some kind of moral certification for their peculiar institution. Today, it is difficult to imagine justifying the enslavement of 4 million human beings, but rich Southerners believed that slavery was not only a necessary way to grow cotton and other crops, but also a good, kind, and decent way of life. Southerner George Fisher compared the lives of slaves to those of factory workers in the North. He claimed that certain slaves worked fewer hours, had more to eat, had better clothes and housing, and were not cast out when they became too old to work. According to him, all workers in the North simply starve if they had no family to support them. Factory owners felt no responsibility for the welfare of their workers. Fisher, of course, overlooked the cruel and brutal qualities of slavery. His reasoning, though, helped convince many Southerners that by defending slavery, they were defending a wonderful way of life. Meanwhile, anti-slavery thinking was gaining power in the North. Battle lines between the North and the South were being drawn. Compromise of 1820. Congressmen continued trying to prevent slavery from destroying the Union. Some believed they had put the issue of slavery expansion to rest with the passage of the Missouri Compromise of 1820. But Thomas Jefferson knew better. He wrote, "This momentous question, like a fire bell in the night, awakened and filled me with terror. I consider it at once the death knell of the Union." Jefferson was correct. Westward expansion proved to be the primary reason that Americans could no longer compromise over slavery. The more Americans triumph in bringing land into the nation, the more they disagree about what to do with it. This was particularly the case when the United States acquired much of the American Southwest from Mexico between 1846 and 1848. War with Mexico. War between Mexico and the United States had been brewing since shortly after Texas declared independence from Mexico in 1836. The Mexican government did not recognize Texas' independence and continued to claim the area between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. In 1845, despite anti-slavery opposition, Texas had been admitted to the Union as a slave state. President James Polk sent a military force to defend its borders. When U.S. troops crossed into the disputed area, the Mexicans fired on them. Not all Americans supported the war, with Polk blamed on Mexico. A young congressman from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln spoke out eloquently against it. But America's victory brought new lands for settlement. California, Utah, Nevada, most of the New Mexico, and Arizona, and portions of Colorado and Wyoming all became part of the United States. The question of whether the new lands should permit slavery was immediately raised. David Willman, a congressman from Pennsylvania, introduced a legislative amendment that would have made the Missouri Compromise of 1820 null and void by banning slavery from all territory seized during the Mexican-American War. This Wilmot proviso did not become law, but it was a sign of how powerful anti-slavery opinion had become in the North. The measure's defeat ensured that the 1850s would see fights over the questions of slavery in the territories. The real question, though, was whether the Union could survive half slaves and half free.